Hello there, and welcome back to the Disc Connected. I am Ryan Verrill, and I'm here with a lot of incredibly interesting people. If it's possible, I'd just like to go around the room and have people share your names and sort of your history and attachment to film at the moment. Richard, can we start with you?
What do you want to know? My attachment to film?
Yeah, your attachment to film, what you've been doing with it lately, and just who you are. So it's difficult for me to lead into a bio on you. I mean, you're a legend.
Oh no! I hope not. That sounds horrible. But I understand what you mean. I understand. It was meant as a compliment. Yeah. Give me one question, and I'll go from there. What would you like to know?
Richard, what do you think your biggest impact on the state of film throughout the last 70 years has been?
None. Well, none. I'm serious. What would that possibly be?
Richard is from West Side Story. Richard is from Twin Peaks. Richard has directed The Interview and a lot of compelling pieces that I actually got some interesting questions for. Anything else that you want to throw out there that you feel is impactful for your life that you were a part of?
Trying to get this communication together today is the biggest thing in my life.
Well, I'm grateful you were able to make it work.
Well, I had nothing to do with it. I just called my friend and said, help. And so she's the person.
Well, you're a problem solver. I mean, it takes that middleman to get it done.
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
Ross, can you explain who you are and what you've done with Richard?
You go for it, Ross.
I'll try. So my name's Ross Lipman, and I'm a film restorationist and sometimes filmmaker. And I was honored a few years back when some friends of mine at a company called Arbalos sent me a link to this film that was so crazy they felt even they wouldn't be able to distribute it. And they thought, who do you call when you have a work that's so unusual that there's no possible chance of commercial release? Well, they called me, and I watched it and was The Interview. Richard filmed The Interview, and I thought it was spectacular. And so I got Richard's contact information and reached out to him, and then also reached out to Jesse at Lightbox, who you'll hear from in a moment. And one thing led to another, and here we are today.
If you think the thing you saw was off the wall, you are in for a big surprise.
Richard is still working on his new version. I think that's what he's talking about here.
Interesting. We'll hear about that in a minute then. Jesse, can you tell us about Lightbox and who Jesse is?
Yes, I'm Jesse Pires. I'm the director and curator of Lightbox Film Center at the University of the Arts. And we are a film exhibition space that has been going on at other locations in the city of Philadelphia since the 1970s, but most recently have now become part of the University of the Arts. And, we specialize in independent film, underground film, avant-garde, whatever, you name, repertory film. Like I said, we've been an important resource in the city of Philadelphia for unusual films. And Richard's film was, as Ross stated, quite spectacular and unusual and mesmerizing and anything else I can possibly think of. And more recently, we have now begun to preserve films with the help of Ross. That was an initiative that happened shortly after the onset of COVID. And I reached out to Ross and said, let's talk about what we can do. And The Interview was one of the first films that he mentioned to me.
Wow. Interesting. Well, I mean, we keep beating around the bush a little bit, Richard. Can you tell us what The Interview is?
Well, first of all, it was a film that I and some friends made. I think it was, what is it, Ross, 75 or something it was for?
I think the first cut was 1973, but you were, shooting before then and continued working on it, obviously. Yeah.
Right.
And it was a film that we just a few friends and I went to Big Sur and started doing just some fun ideas. And the more we shot and the more we played, the more we started finding that maybe this had more than just a couple shots. I mean, we went up there just to play because I'd been to Big Sur before, and my friend wanted to go up there, and the woman that I was living with said, let's go up and just, and people started, for instance, would tell us things. There was a cemetery, an old family cemetery on top of this hill overlooking the ocean. I mean, we were friends with people who lived there. It wasn't like the tourists. Right. And so in that instance, how can I make this coherent? I had a friend back then who had a store in downtown LA. Well, it was a warehouse filled with stuff. You name it, it was there. It would be like if someone was going to make a strange movie, they would go there to get costumes and parts of cars and just all sorts of things. And we put some things in the car and we drove to Big Sur and we started just playing. And the more we played, the more ideas started coming. And it's a beautiful location we have in the film. It's just extraordinary. Hollywood had used it a lot, but we became acquainted with the people who actually owned the part of the land, and we all became friends, and we all just started shooting. And after a while, it really grew more and more, and then we started doing specific things. But there was no sense of we're going to go do something, make a film, you know. It was we're just playing. And play just got more and more serious. And at one point, I had run out of money for the 16 millimeter camera. So I decided I wanted to finish the film anyway. So I started shooting in Super 8. I just heard about Super 8. I knew they weren't going to be compatible, but I just wanted to keep playing.
Right.
And then at a certain point, after I had started editing for about a year in Super 8, I got a residual from West Side Story that allowed me to go back to 16 millimeters. So I had to take all the the Super 8 and have it blown up to 16 millimeter. And then sound started coming into it, and then it became very serious.
I don't know what it is about Big Sur. I'm actually from California, and I've been to Big Sur many times, and there's something about that place that is special.
Oh, it's just magical, yeah.
It's way more grounding than so many other places. It's probably the confluence of the ocean and the fact that you have so much greenery around there.
Well, also there's only one way in and one way out.
Yes.
I mean, you come in one way or you can go out the other, but there's just those two ways.
Yeah, I've seen many people run out of gas on that Pacific Coast Highway coming from there.
But it's changed a lot through the years. But back in the 60s and 70s, it was a big family more than anything. Everybody knew each other. What's to tell you?
One of the interesting things is, you left full-time acting for a little while after West Side Story and some of the other projects that you'd been doing. What attracted you originally to that documentary filmmaking, or was it just this sense of exploration, basically?
The first film I made was in Mississippi in '64. It was called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and we were doing a voter registration for the what was it called? The Democratic. It wasn't for the regular. It was trying to get blacks to register to vote.
Right.
That was one of the things we did. And the other thing was to start community centers for anyone, but mainly blacks. It didn't have anything like that. And so I was down there all summer. When I first arrived, there was an orientation. And after the orientation, I thought they had said that there was going to be a winter project too. And I thought, well, if I could just do some little clips, film, that would be good for the next wave of people coming down. And I mentioned it to someone who was a leader or whatever, and he said, yeah, go ahead. So I spent the summer doing voter registration and so forth and keeping away from the police all summer. And I had accumulated a lot of film.
Yeah.
Someone sent me from the camera store in LA I used to go to. I said, I want to make this. How do I do it? And he said, well, I'm going to send you a light meter. I'm going to send you a Bolex. And whatever the light meter says, repeat that same on the camera, and goodbye and good luck. So I shot all summer. I got back to LA. Some people said, okay, you really got this, but now you need an editor. And they put me together with somebody, and I realized that was not going to work. So I decided I was going to edit it myself. So that was the first. And again, it was the same process. I mean, I just started shooting things that I liked.
Yeah.
And it is quite a lovely film. And it's just been... did you ever see it, Jesse?
Oh, yeah. It's fantastic.
Oh, so... it's the same process I've done on 3 feature-length films now, but it's the same thing. I just kind of find my way through. In other words, there's no script.
Right.
I've worked with people who are actors, but only in a slight way, you know.
Right.
So anyway, that started everything, and after that, that took me into the 70s, and then and the film now, it's quite a bit different than what Ross put together. That was the 1975 version of the film.
Right.
But when I was making the interview, I had to go to London and make some money, and I made a children's film. And while I was there, my girlfriend and I, who's in the film, sent cassettes to each other, old Sony cassettes. So because we didn't have any money, we would send cassettes to each other and talk to each other that way.
Wow.
And after Ross got the film, I found all those cassettes that we had made to each other. They're extraordinary. The content, listening to her speak, everyone who's listened to anything I've shown them so far, they are amazed at her voice. It's so beautiful. And so I have a whole soundtrack that goes with the film now that wasn't there in 75. Oh, there was
Wow.
a few things. There were a few things, granted. But this is a story now more about a love affair, ups and downs in the love affair, making a film. Right in the middle of a sequence, you might hear say, Richard, for God's sakes, you didn't get the right thing, you know? So I'm constantly weaving through the making of the film, what's in the film itself, and it's always going back and forth like that. So I'm really looking forward to showing it to my 2 friends. And I'm getting very close, by the way. I know you don't think so, but it has been the most difficult thing I've ever tried. It's just trying to weave in a lot of sound and trying to find enough film to cover it. That's been the trick. And also, To help me, though, I went and I found some Super 8, a lot of Super 8 that I had never had blown up. And some of it is absolutely gorgeous, like it was shot yesterday. I mean, it is beautiful, particularly on the young woman. Yeah.
The restoration on these, has there been any significant things that has been a major setback when you're looking at this, or how has it stood up to the test of time?
Well, the project is completed now. There were a lot of challenges at the time, not the least that because Richard is constantly creating, and he's a force of nature, and he's been reworking the material. And that showed in the original elements of the film, which had some of them were deteriorating. All the existing prints were cut up because Richard had done so many variations and revisions over the years. So there was a lot of work involved there. But the work absolutely, I think the film absolutely holds up. I really think it's stunning. And we were very happy to have just had the premiere of the 1975 version, which is the one that we restored at the Rotterdam Film Festival this past January, where it was very well received. Richard, I don't even know if you know about this, but there was a review online from Mubi where they highlighted it as one of the highlights of the entire Rotterdam Film Festival this past year.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Yeah. And anyway, so now it's completed, but we're now in a holding pattern because we're going to wait, and because Richard is working on his new version, and we're, I think, looking forward to seeing when that comes out before next steps. But Jesse can probably tell us more about that, or.
Yeah, let's hear about that. I mean, I'm fascinated to see what comes out of this, because I was able to take a look at this first restoration, and I mean, some of the imagery is just fascinating. One of the things I really wanted to just share, like my personal love affair with, is I don't know if you keep up with modern filmmaking, but a lot of it just has this truly inorganic feel. And watching something that was filmed like this, you can almost like feel the human touch that is being in every single piece of the cell. It's incredible.
So you did see Big Sur?
Yeah, I've seen Big Sur in the film and in real life, and yeah. I'm jealous. I wish I could have seen it back then.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see what Richard has done in terms of his new cut. But as Ross said, he's been working on this on and off for many years. In fact, I think I had seen a kind of midpoint version of the film.
What year was that, Ross? When you guys got involved?
I think Jesse and I both saw a video edit that you had done about 5 or 6 years ago. It was the link that you had sent to Dennis Bartok, who's formerly with Our Rules and now with Death Crocodile.
Wow.
Well, you've been working on it nonstop since 1970 something, but there was a video cut that both Jesse and I saw, and we were knocked out by it. As I should mention, by the way, or Jesse, we should talk about our other partners in the project. Did you want to mention them, or?
On this project?
Yes, so there's the Northeast Historic Film and National Film Preservation Foundation.
Yes, of course, right. So, as Ross mentioned, the original, or at least the most accurate version of the original cut, has been restored, and there's also a print that has been made thanks to the National Film Preservation Foundation and Northeast Historic Film, which is an archive which came on as a partner. So yeah, I mean, the work that Lightbox is doing in terms of film preservation is really just digital preservation. So it's nice to have someone step in and say, we're going to make a new print, particularly for folks who film archiving. A print is the best way to preserve a film. I mean, digital preservation is kind of a short-sighted project. So right. Thanks, Ross, for pointing that out. But I just want to say that seeing that film in that kind of mid cut that Richard made, I was intrigued and I was kind of blown away. I'd never seen anything like it. My area of interest, it really is American avant-garde film. So I had some references that it kept bringing up, but it was especially knowing Richard's work as an actor, and then kind of having this dumped in my lap is like, wait, this isn't just like a side project. I mean, Richard talks about playing, and there's a lot of play, but this is a serious piece of work. It's more than just something that you kind of bang out on the weekend. And then when we finally were able to get that early cut that Ross made, it was just like, wow, this is a virtually unseen masterpiece.
The negative was in pretty good shape, though, wasn't it? Did you start with?
Well, yes and no. The A and B rolls were, but there was remember the mysterious C roll? That was falling apart. That was in near on death's doorstep, and then the magnetic track was also extremely warped and falling apart. So it was really good that we didn't wait any longer. But just circling back to something Jesse said, I couldn't agree more. I think, Richard, you'll probably find this humorous, but when someone says that, oh well, Richard Beymer made a film, a lot of people's first association, for right or for wrong, is West Side Story, and so there will be people in the avant-garde community who might say, oh well, this is just going to be a novelty, and it is absolutely not. It is it's an astounding work, and Jesse and I have been working with these types of films for years, and I mean it's really something. And so I think that there's that it shatters expectations. It's not the side project of a Hollywood actor who suddenly discovered avant-garde film. This is somebody who's really forged his own path and created a profound and important work.
And just from the cut that I saw, I mean, you can feel that again, and that's one of the things I want to ask.
Where did you see it?
I got the link from Jesse.
Okay.
When you are pouring your heart and soul into this for literally decades at this point, how attached do you feel to this at this point? Just personally attached, because it's got to be a huge part of your life.
I have fallen in love with the young woman again. And sometimes I actually have to get up, get in the car, and take a drive. Wow. Because what the soundtrack is doing, what the sound is doing is just bringing everything back to life. I mean, I can feel the place that we lived in. It's been an incredible adventure for me, this part of putting this part together. And I'm even thinking, I've divided it up in 4 parts. I don't even know how long it is, guys, at this point. I'm guessing that each part is probably a lot longer than you want it to be. I just got a feeling. Anyway, I had to put it in 4 parts because it was just getting unwieldy, and I needed to just stick with one thing. Otherwise, I was going way down to get something. And so I was hoping, my fantasy is that even before I finish the whole thing, knowing, that it's the sound, everything has to be fixed, I was just going to try to figure out how to send you a couple of the 1 and the 4 and the 3 and the 2, just to let you know that I'm working on it all the time, and sometimes it just gets away from me.
With decades of work put into that and it being so meaningful to you, are you discovering new things in it that maybe you feel like you could have left breadcrumbs for yourself from decades ago? Because I imagine you're falling in love again with this person and discovering maybe new textures in this. Anything that's revealed itself to you in the process over the years?
Well, just everything. I mean, from the film itself to our relationship to why in the world did I do that? Now it's definitely about a love affair.
Yeah.
And the love affair is intertwined with the movie that's being made. And so you will see. I hope.
Love that. Looking back at that Summer Project documentary from '64, I mean, this is almost 60 years ago. How do you look back on that now with a lot of the same things being faced in this country nowadays? I mean, there's a lot of things we're still struggling with. That was a major problem back then.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know if anyone remembers, but the major thing that summer was the 3 boys were missing. And Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, 2 guys from New York and a black guy from somewhere in Mississippi. And they disappeared. They were part of and everyone knew that they were killed. I mean, this was obvious. But at the end of the summer, they were finally found, the 3 boys, under a dam.
It's hard to hear. It's also hard to hear that we are so stubborn as humans in this country that we're not very separated from that yet in 6 decades.
But it was an incredible summer of joy, and the black people that I met down there, if you see the film, they would say things like, I've never been able to talk to a white person except to say yes or no, sir. And we were having joyous times together.
Yeah.
There were some rough spots, and I almost hit one of them really hard, but I managed to get out of it. So what do I think of the film? I really like it. And just recently, it's been, you call it up-resing, when you take some old film and you make it look like it's new.
Yeah.
And that's just been done to that film.
Wow.
What?
Did that experience contribute? I mean, I feel like there's your story is sort of this moment in the late 60s that you are kind of becoming disillusioned with acting in Hollywood. I mean, do you feel like some of those experiences contributed to that? I'm just curious.
No, I wasn't disillusioned. I just couldn't get a job.
Okay.
I'll be very...
That in and of itself would make you one disillusioned, right?
It's got to be frustrating after something like West Side Story.
Well, more than anything, West Side Story showed me more than anything that I didn't know enough. I just didn't know enough.
I understand that. I mean, there's being very young at that time, and then yet at the same time, you clearly knew enough to make some incredible choices and capture some things on film over the next decade that was really important.
Yeah, but all of that just kind of happened really naturally. I mean, before I went to Mississippi, I started doing stills when I was about 16. A friend of mine took me into a dark room and showed me things, and I just fell in love. And so I was doing a lot of stills before someone said, "Why are you doing this? And I thought, well, it's just making stills, but they're moving. I just don't see the problem. So, so that's, and I didn't see anything, of course, when we were shooting. I could never get it developed in Mississippi. But when I came back to LA, my agent let me have a room in the office, and I sat there one night and I looked at all the rushes, and I just got up and whooped and hollered and danced around. I could not believe what was there. It was just a thrill. Yeah.
That's awesome. Jesse, with all of this film preservation, I'm curious what you, just being sort of a man on the inside, what do you think is, one of the most dangerous aspects of film preservation right now? Is there something that we're on the verge of losing that lots of people that aren't on the inside wouldn't really know about?
Yeah, I mean, and Ross could certainly speak to this as well, but I'm finding, well, at first I'm finding that there is this groundswell maybe of people in the industry and sort of tangentially connected to the film industry who are much more concerned and much more eager to contribute or in some way to help preserve films and kind of reclaim these lost works. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that we're in this weird moment of this kind of golden era of streaming, if you will, where everyone assumes that, oh, well, you can go on the internet and you can watch anything at any time and everything is available. This kind of illusion that it's all out there, when in fact it's disappearing even more rapidly, and there's so many black holes and pockets where films are just not accessible. I think that was the motivation. I mean, it's funny, this project came about. A trustee of the university gave us a very generous donation and said, we want you to do something with this, but there was no strings attached. Here is some money, please, sit on this idea, come back to us and explain to us what you want to do. Now, of course, this was also at the height of the COVID pandemic, so we weren't even in person doing in-person screenings. So perhaps that influenced my thinking, but I just in my mind, I pictured all these films that I wanted to see, all the films that should be seen, I could just imagine them out there and they're not, and I can't see them, I can't touch them, so that I think was a big influence on wanting to do this project. And like I said, I've worked with Ross over the years. I know his work as a filmmaker and archivist, and he's a great guy, and just picked up the phone and said, hey, I've got some money. Let's talk about what we can do.
Yeah,
awesome.
Speaking to that, I was going to just say, Jesse, speaking to something you said earlier, I don't think you need to apologize for not doing the film out work. I mean, that was another component of the project, and it's great that we got to do both. And in years past, I had been a film purist, which is a lot of us were back in the day. But the digital technology really is so good these days that there's absolutely nothing to about. I mean, the experience is first rate, and also, to be honest, the art of film projection is a dying art. This might speak to one of your questions, Ryan. So, when you go to certainly 16 millimeter venues, there's very few in the world that can project a 16 millimeter print in optimal conditions. 35, it's a little better, but even that's harder to find these days. And the digital projection is standardized. It's everywhere. I mean, I shouldn't say standards exist. It varies from theater to theater, but the fact is that the restorations that Lightbox is putting out, not just with myself, but with others, are really hold their own as their state of the art. This is what everyone is doing. You're not doing any less than anyone else is doing these days. Very few places are still preserving to film. Only a small handful of archives. The studios are doing everything digitally, and so that's really where the audiences are in the digital medium. Then you get into the question of theatrical versus home viewing. And I realize that, Ryan, your podcast, I think, caters to home viewing. And the great thing is that home viewing is capable of excellent, experiences these days. But that isn't always the case. People are often viewing things on their laptops, on their phones. That's not the way that filmmakers want their films to be seen in most cases. There are exceptions. But for those of you, your listeners, who make that effort to try to create a good viewing environment for these works that the filmmakers make, more power to you. And Jesse, with both your series and the exhibition series, as well as the restorations, where you present them properly in a theater, that's the important work. That's where these films are really being seen. So, thanks.
To speak to about Richard's film in particular, it's funny when we first we're talking with Richard and talking about the project. Ross had to explain, we want to preserve the original film, as we mentioned that we have, and Richard was sort of like, what do you want with that? That's old news. I've got new ideas, I've got new stuff. Let's focus on that. And I think that's both are great. And I think for me to speak to this this notion of like the materiality of the film and the sort of element of preservation, it was very important for me to have as close as possible version of this film that screened. It screened at the Whitney, it screened at other venues, just to kind of have this sense of what it was at that particular time. That's the true spirit of archiving. And then now we have this wonderful work that is still underway, that Richard's still doing. We'll have a great kind of contrast, if you will. Two films that are connected but also different.
Even though I do discuss the home video aspect a lot, one of the things that I always try to stress is accessibility. And the truth of the matter is, most of this is out of the cost range for people because they're not going to put money into what they see as a dying format for the last 30 years, even though it's in some circles thriving, you could say. But the theatrical experience is still magical in many places. It may not be the essence of a 60 millimeter projection in a lot of places, or hell, it might not even be 35 millimeter in most places. But the feeling that you can get in a place like this, or a film festival where you're discovering the interview for the first time, that you can feel the 70s as you're watching it. You can feel young Richard as you're watching it. It is an astonishingly different experience. And that's one of the questions, I guess, is with the difference of technology advancing, I personally see one of the other problems right now is there are a lot of people that the sensibilities of the film goers have changed so much that they're not challenging themselves anymore. They're looking to have something that is a completely laid out experience for them. I mean, Richard, you've been doing this for so long. Do you feel like there's a difference between people that would go to the cinema back then and people that are, maybe engrossed in film nowadays?
I don't have an answer. I don't know. I mean, I used to go to what was known as art houses in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And all art, the Bergmans and the French New Wave and all of this. And I don't know. I just enjoyed that world more than I did Hollywood. Maybe it has something to do with what you were saying. It was there's something really alive about it. The
Yes.
people that made those films also. They had the same feeling. Bergman, whoever goes off on an island and shoots a film that he's putting together and not sure where it's going, and all of that was very fascinating to me.
I imagine so. Is there anybody from the last even 20, 25 years that has elicited some of those same feelings for you?
I'm just thinking of one film now, but I can't tell you the director. It was called Roma.
Roma. Yeah, Roma is great.
And I just thought that was such a wonderful film. So simple, but just elegant. Yeah.
That was Alfonso Cuarón, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
That was a big deal when that came out. That touched a lot of people, I think.
And that was one that I mean, I guess it's a Netflix. It was a Netflix film, or at least they had a partial
Distribution. Yeah.
Right.
distribution. Yeah, but they, or I don't know if it was at their insistence, but there was a moment where it was like people were like, you can't just stream this. This needs to happen in theaters. So there was a theatrical rollout.
Yeah,
thankfully.
Is there a future for some of these newer cuts of the interview coming where we can hopefully see some of these in a theater around us?
Well, we have a plan to, we have several projects now underway, of film preservation projects, and our plan is to premiere them at Lightbox. Some of them in the fall. Hopefully, the interview, we can have a back-to-back, one day of the original, one day of the new. And, I think that, festival screenings are certainly something we're hoping that will happen. I think Richard is invited back to Rotterdam to show the new cut at some point too. So yeah, hopefully, this we're going to see it.
It's good to hear. And speaking about the festivals and everything, Jesse, curious if you have any sort of pattern or philosophy that you go back to for curation? Because one of the hardest aspects I imagine with the film preservation nowadays is simply cost. We don't have the same sensibilities we used to. We have to pick and choose what we're kind of putting our money into nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of on the exhibition side, I mean, this is something I've been doing for 20 years or so, and Lightbox existed. It wasn't called Lightbox back then, but it started in the 1970s, and really had this philosophy that that many kind of film societies and underground or micro cinemas that have which is we want to show films that will have different perspectives, that will engage audiences in different ways, show them different things. And also, for me, I think it's important to view cinema as a language, right? And so folks who might be fluent in the Hollywood or commercial cinema would do well to also learn other languages. The avant-garde film could be another language, but it's still it's still telling stories. It's still speaking. It's just speaking in different ways. So that's sort of how I see film. And I teach a class on avant-garde film. So I sort of do the same thing where I talk to students who are young and maybe say, oh, I don't know how familiar you are with avant-garde film, but don't be afraid.
Right.
Still moving images. You're still going to be sitting in a dark room. You're going to, experience a variety of emotions, maybe frustration, maybe glee, and whatever comes, but it's still a cinema experience. So being as fluent as possible in all sorts of cinema is really my goal as a curator.
That is well said. Yeah, that's something I try to pass on as much as I can. I mean, there's so many people that are stuck in a lane, and when you don't challenge yourself, there's entire worlds that you're never going to discover out there.
Yeah.
Richard, I would be remiss to not hear at least one Lynch story, if you don't mind. Anything super interesting that you could pass on from working on Twin Peaks? It's a fascinating experience, I imagine, being around David Lynch, even for a couple hours at a time.
Well, I mean, I made a film with David in India.
Yeah.
Did you know that? It was,
yeah, I watched some of the videos that were available online on that. Yeah.
Oh, little snippets, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, that's the film is almost an hour and a half. So, I mean, I don't know what to say about him. He's a friend, and he's just he's like a little kid in many instances. He comes out with expressions when he's excited about something. He says, "Oh golly, gosh, is that wonderful?" I mean, he's just a different kind of human being. As an actor, he's someone. He tells you exactly what he wants.
Yeah.
He's not there to say, "Hey, let's talk about this scene and what might be good for it." That is not a part of his vocabulary. He knows what he wants, and he tells you what it is, and then you do it. I think a lot of actors wouldn't like that, because a lot of actors, particularly very famous ones, they like to add something. Or, hey, let me try this, let me try that.
Yeah.
No trying. No.
Makes sense. Ross, with restoration work, is there any project that you've had a hand in that you feel like you're just immensely proud of the amount of restoration that you're able to complete on it? There's something fascinating about what people have when they do restoration work, and it makes such a big impact because they worked 300 hours on or something to complete. That I love to hear how they feel about those afterwards.
Oh, well, there's two levels of things. There's just, the honor of being associated with certain great works. And then there's also, one likes to take pride in the work one has put in. I think two titles where, well, there's a lot of titles where I feel like the restoration work helped. But I was proud of the work that we did on Charles Burnett's Killer of Sheep. John Cassavetes' Shadows were two that I think were able to do some work that helped the original work to be seen in a more clear way. What I mean by that is, in some cases, particularly with lower budget films, all that existed in the past were not just 16 millimeter prints, but bad ones, because the filmmakers were working with limited resources, and they only, any prints would have been an afterthought. The money really went into getting the thing filmed in the first place, and so they would send it off to the lab. And some archivists might say, "Oh, well, your job is to replicate the old prints," and I'd say, "Well, what about the negative? Because, if you're replicating an old print of Killer of Sheep, you're not representing the work of Charles Burnett. You're representing the work of whoever was doing the night shift at Deluxe Lab on a given night in 1973. The original work of Charles Burnett's in the negative, and there were ways to print it much better. It wasn't that we were adding anything to it, but he had done some brilliant cinematography. The original prints were, soft and degraded, and likewise with the sound. And so just simply by doing one's work properly, it's like, oh, look at that. You can actually see the image and hear the film. A classic example with that would be Barbara Loden's Wanda. There were some old reviews I found that said, the film its authenticity is improved by the crappy way it looks. I'm paraphrasing. It adds to the authenticity. And then I also found an interview with Barbara Loden, who said, actually, the original camera rolls were beautiful. It was just crappy lab work. That's why the film looked that way. And we were able to bring out the original, qualities of the film stock. And so one takes pride in those things, but really it's just an honor to be able to work on these great films like The Interview, and to work with people like Richard and Jesse.
Ross, I have to bring it up because he just passed, but you worked on Kenneth Anger's films, and I know that he had made changes and cuts and things like that. I'm just curious. We had talked years ago about some of your experiences with Kenneth Anger, but I'm just curious about some of your experience with those films, like Rabbit's Moon and things like that. Yeah, just curious to hear some angles.
Rabbit's Moon is another great example. Richard, if you'll forgive us going off and talking about, Kenneth Anger for a bit, and he just passed, of course, in the last couple of weeks and was just announced the other day.
Please, talk about
it. So Rabbit's Moon he shot in 1951 on 35 millimeter nitrate film in France, but he then never was able to finish editing it until 1971. He got the negative back, and he had no money, so he had reduced to 16 millimeter and had the images flipped left to right as an inadvertent example or byproduct of the reduction process, and released these blurry 16 millimeter prints. Well, we got the original 35 millimeter nitrate, and were able to finally restore Rabbit's Moon from the original nitrate negative, and the prints were pristine and looked stunning, and Kenneth loved them. He was so happy with them. And we restored the original image orientation of the photography, and but he did want to make some changes too, Richard. Interestingly enough, at that time I was working with UCLA, and UCLA, the archives job is really not to help the artists make their new work. So again, it was a similar situation. We focused on the older version. Kenneth never did go around to making his alternate newer cut of Rabbit's Moon. But in the case of The Interview, obviously, Richard's been able to go ahead and do it. And then also, interestingly enough, Lightbox is not being a classical archive per se, is a little bit more is flexible, and they were also able to work with Wayne Wang on his re-edit of a film called Life is Cheap. That was another project that Jesse did.
Wayne Wang's getting a lot of attention lately. There was the restoration of a few of his works, and Criterion's been releasing a couple of them. It's been nice to see some attention given that way.
But it's interesting to see that the new editions of the work by living artists coming out concurrent with the older versions and the restorations. Because that was what we did with Wayne Wang's Life is Cheap too.
Well, and as somebody that's doing it literally right now, Richard, I would love to hear just your philosophy on the idea of, perhaps archiving the original version of a film that was made while also making changes and having that available as well. And it seems to be a pretty pretty aggressive touching point for some of these people lately, where they're sad that the version they saw perhaps growing up, they feel like they'll lose because somebody is changing the color grade of something, or going in and editing some of these scenes. Do you think that there's an obligation that a filmmaker has to keep things the same for the people that have experienced it, or are you just wanting to get your vision out there as a filmmaker?
My vision out there, I just don't know how to answer those questions. I don't think about it that way. I mean, I get up in the morning and I like a painter gets up and they paint, and it's for other people to like it or not like it. This particular version, just the way it came about, I mean, I'm really liking it. Yeah.
That's good, and that is a way to answer. That's one of the, I think, important ways to answer, is that for some, it's not something that they hold as near, because when they complete it, it's up to you to decide if you like it or not. It's just what I did, basically.
Yeah, and I don't see it as much as like George Lucas going back and, if I only had the digital technology to do this, and now I do. Now I'm going to go back. I think, and I don't want to speak for Richard, but my sense is that this film in particular is very personal, and so it's I can, as he said, like a painter, it's a work that is constantly evolving, and is Richard's a living artist, and he wants to continue to work on it. I think that is much more exciting to me than to simply say, I'm going to go back and I'm going to make silly changes because my fans want it, or whatever.
I love that you're getting something new out of it as you're working on it as well. When you're done, do you think that there's any feelings that you're hoping to elicit in the viewers when this starts to make the festival circuit?
I don't care.
Good.
I just don't care. I mean, it's like a love affair. Some other people might not like who you're with, but I don't care. I'm having a relationship with it that's really putting me through a lot. One of the things is, can I get this finished so Jesse can show it? But no, I don't think too much about that sort of stuff. I really don't. No. I mean, it's lovely to hear when, you guys have been saying things about you saw this in the film and that. And it's lovely to hear. I say, okay, that's validation that I'm on the right track. But I have quite a few films and documentaries that no one's ever seen.
Right.
And I show them to friends, and then I put them on the shelf. I go, but I really don't care what they think. I care about what they think about life, but I don't care if they like it or not. It just doesn't make any difference to me. There was two people that I really wanted. The last film that I made, called In the Shadow of a Red Truck. And I just wanted two people to see it because I knew they would be very honest with me. One was David, and the other one is a reviewer who reviewed a book that I wrote, and I just loved the way he tore it apart and put it back together again and did all wonderful things with it. He knew about literature, he knew about filmmaking, and he just piled it all in there. And it was lovely to hear. And I know both of those people would, apart from that, I show it to some friends, and that's kind of the end of the story. I mean, I just don't have an audience. I would love to have an audience. Be able to share something that I care about, but I don't know where that is. I mean, the film festival that Ross mentioned, that seems to be an interesting place. I'm looking forward to that.
Good. There's a lot of them out there, I'm sure, that would love to see this.
Well, there's just 3 people I care about now at this moment.
On that note, that is a wonderful way to pull this to a close. I hope when this starts making the actual festival circuit rounds that people can find a way to see this semi-locally and hopefully get this into more eyeballs out across the world, because what I've seen so far, I truly loved, Richard, so thank you for it.
As far as I'm concerned, the 3 of you are the beginning of an audience,
Yeah.
You see where it goes, and sometimes it takes off, and sometimes you put it back on the shelf, and but there's certain paintings that I do that I really care about over the years. I'll walk by it and say, I still like that, I don't want to change anything. And I know Ross would love to hear that from me, that I'm not going to change anything.
No, I'm looking forward to the new version.
I'm just really looking forward to you two seeing it.
Can't wait.
I might even just bring out part one. There was 4 parts. Get part 1 and just send it to you and see what you're thinking.
Love it.
It'd be great.
Beautiful. Ross, Jesse, Richard, this has been incredible. I love hearing all the inside stuff on this. Hopefully we can get some of you back or all of you back again someday and talk about it once it starts making the circuits.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Making the circuits. Wow.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now I got pressure here, too.
Thank you for listening to the Disconnected Podcast. There's one big thing that you could do to help the show, and that is to leave a rating and review on the podcast service of your choice. Thank you.